A divided house. My wife threw my clothes on the floor and told me to leave our home just because. I asked her brother to finally contribute. She thought I'd come crawling back, but instead, I let her discover what life really looks like without me. When I first opened the door to my own home that evening and saw my clothes scattered across the floor, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. The neat stacks I had left in the morning were gone. Instead, shirts, pants, even my work jacket lay in a messy pile by the doorway, as though I were nothing more than an unwelcome guest. My wife Sarah stood there with her arms folded, her face taut with determination. "You're not sleeping here tonight," she said sharply. "Go find somewhere else. Think about how you treat my brother." Her words struck harder than the sight of my belongings on the floor. Just hours earlier, I had left for work, believing we were a family, maybe a struggling one, but still united. Now, I was being evicted from my own home, not by a landlord or an employer, but by the woman I had promised to build a life with. And all of this because I had dared to ask her brother, a grown man in his latter 20s, perfectly capable of working, to contribute something, anything, to the household he had been living in for free. For months, he had eaten our food, used our electricity, lounged on our couch while watching endless television, left his dirty dishes in the sink, as if we were running some sort of free motel. I hadn't yelled at him. I hadn't insulted him. I had simply said the obvious. If you want to live here, you need to help out, either with expenses or with chores. It's only fair. But fairness wasn't what Sarah wanted to hear. I stood in the entryway for a long moment, torn between anger and disbelief. My own house, where my hard-earned paycheck covered every bill, every meal, every repair. And suddenly, I was the outsider. Sarah's brother, James, didn't even look at me. He sat comfortably on the couch, one arm lazily draped over the backrest, smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, as if he had been waiting for this moment. It was in his eyes that I first saw it. Satisfaction. He had gotten what he wanted. He had driven a wedge between us. "I'll go," I finally said, my voice quieter than I expected. But this isn't the end of it. I picked up a few things from the pile, just enough to get me through the night, and walked back out, closing the door behind me with a calmness that felt unnatural. Inside, my emotions churned like a storm: hurt, betrayal, and a quiet growing anger. That night, as I sat alone in a small, cheap motel on the edge of town, I replayed her words again and again. "Think about how you treat my brother." I thought about it all night, staring at the cracked ceiling, my mind spinning in circles. By the time dawn broke and pale light seeped through the dirty blinds, something inside me had shifted. If she wanted me gone, fine. But if she thought I would quietly surrender the life I had built, the home I had paid for, the future I had envisioned, she was mistaken. The next morning I returned, and that's when everything began to unravel. When I walked back into the house the next morning, the air was heavy with silence. Sarah stood in the kitchen making coffee as if nothing had happened, while her brother still occupied the living room like a king on his throne. His feet were up on the coffee table, my coffee table, a half-empty cereal bowl balancing on the arm of the couch. Neither of them greeted me. It was as though I had already been demoted to a guest. I placed my overnight bag by the door and quietly said, "We need to talk." Sarah didn't even look up from the coffee machine. "About what?" "You were out last night." "That was your choice?" I bit back the urge to laugh. My choice. She had literally thrown my clothes into the hallway, but I kept my composure because anger wouldn't help me now. "About us," I replied calmly. "About the fact that your brother has been living here for months, without lifting a finger while I'm the one paying the mortgage, the bills, the groceries. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. I'm asking for respect." At that, James snorted. "Respect? You think you can buy respect with your paycheck? This is family, man. You don't put a price tag on family." I turned to face him fully. Family helps each other. Family doesn't freeload. His smirk widened, and for a split second, I saw the triumph flash across his face. He wanted this argument. He thrived on it. And worse, Sarah was standing on his side of the battlefield. "James is right," she said, finally turning toward me. Her tone was sharp, her eyes cold. He's my brother. He's been through a lot. He needs a place to stay. I won't let you bully him into paying rent like some stranger. I inhaled slowly, my chest tightening. This isn't about rent. It's about responsibility. If he can't contribute financially, then fine. Let him take care of chores or grocery runs or something. Anything. I'm not running a free ride here, but every word I spoke seemed to push her further away. She wasn't listening to reason anymore. She was defending her brother with blind loyalty, and I was the enemy. James leaned back and folded his arms. Maybe you should just move out if you've got such a problem. I mean, we're happy here. We don't need your negativity around. For a moment, I froze. The audacity of it stunned me. We're happy here in my house, with my money, with my wife. I could feel my blood rushing hot through my veins. But I forced myself to remain calm because in that moment, I realized something important. They both thought they had already won. They thought I would either accept this humiliation or leave quietly, surrendering everything I had built. That was their mistake. Maybe you're right, I said slowly, forcing a small smile. Maybe I do need to think about things. I picked up my overnight bag again. This time I wasn't heading for another motel. No, this time I was leaving with a different purpose. Because I had finally understood, if they wanted a war, they had chosen the wrong man to fight. And as I stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the first pieces of my plan began to take shape. I drove aimlessly for a while, the hum of the engine steadying my thoughts. Anger had always been my first reaction, but this time I knew I couldn't afford to let it consume me. This wasn't just a marital argument. It was a test of whether I would let myself be pushed out of my own life. I pulled into a quiet park and sat on a bench, watching the morning joggers and parents with strollers. Their ordinary routines made my situation feel surreal. Just yesterday, I had been a husband coming home from work. Today, I was a man displaced from his own house. I thought back to the years I had worked overtime shifts, the late nights answering work calls, the promotions that had finally allowed us to buy that house. Every inch of it had been built from my effort. And now, a man who contributed nothing was telling me to leave. I opened my phone and began scrolling through old pictures, vacations Sarah and I had taken, birthdays, holidays. In every image, I had thought we were happy. But looking at them now, I noticed something else. James was in most of them too. Always in the background, always present, as if he had quietly taken root in our lives long before I recognized it. That realization hit me harder than I expected. Maybe this wasn't sudden. Maybe I had ignored the signs for too long. I closed the photo gallery and instead opened my bank app. My name was on every major account. The mortgage, the utilities, the car, my paycheck funded all of it. If they wanted to act like I was irrelevant, then maybe it was time for them to experience what life looked like without me. The thought calmed me, gave me a strange sense of control. I didn't need to fight in the living room or shout in the kitchen. Quiet decisions made carefully would speak louder than any confrontation. Still, a part of me ached. I loved Sarah, at least I thought I did. But love doesn't look like choosing someone else's comfort over your partner's dignity. Love doesn't mean forcing your husband out so your brother can stay. By the time I stood up from that bench, I wasn't the same man who had left the house last night with his clothes in a bag. No, I was steadier, focused. If they wanted me gone, I would show them exactly what gone felt like. The following days felt like I was walking through a strange dream. I didn't immediately return to the house, choosing instead to stay at a modest short-term rental on the other side of town. It wasn't glamorous, just a small furnished apartment with creaky floors and peeling paint. But it gave me space. Space to think, to breathe, and most importantly to plan. Every evening after work, I sat at the wobbly dining table with my laptop open, staring at the numbers, my salary, our joint account, the bills, the mortgage. Slowly, methodically, I began separating what was ours from what was mine. I had always been generous, too generous. When we married, I added her to my accounts. I had given her access to the credit cards, trusting her completely. That trust had now been weaponized against me. But I wasn't powerless. I still had my individual savings account, the one I had kept quietly on the side for emergencies. She didn't know the exact balance, but it was enough to keep me steady if things went south. The more I analyzed, the clearer the picture became. They couldn't survive without me. The mortgage payments came from my account. The utilities were in my name. Even the grocery card was tied to my paycheck. Sarah's income was small, just part-time hours at a boutique shop. Her brother, he didn't have a job at all. So why did they think they could push me out? Because they assumed I would keep paying no matter how they treated me. That night, staring at the numbers, I realized the truth. My revenge didn't need to be loud. I didn't need to shout or slam doors. All I had to do was step back and let reality do the work for me. But before I made any drastic moves, I wanted clarity. Was Sarah really blind to what she was doing? Or had she chosen her brother over me long ago? The next evening, I returned to the house quietly at a time I knew I wouldn't be expected. My key still worked. The lights were on, laughter spilling from the living room. I paused in the hallway unseen, listening. James's voice rang out first. He'll come crawling back. You'll see. He doesn't have the guts to actually leave. He needs you. Sarah's laughter followed. Maybe, but for once, I feel like we're in control. He's always making the decisions, always talking about money. I'm tired of it. It's good to have you here. Her words cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't just about loyalty to her brother. It was about resentment toward me. Resentment I hadn't even known was brewing. I backed out quietly before they noticed me. My chest heavy, my mind racing. So, it was true. They were united against me. I drove back to the small apartment, sat down at the shaky table, and opened my laptop again. But this time, there was no hesitation. I started drafting the steps, redirect my paycheck to my individual account, cancel the grocery card, put utilities on hold until further notice, insult a lawyer about the mortgage and property division. It was all so simple. And the beauty of it was this. I didn't need to tell them a thing. I closed the laptop and leaned back, a strange calm settling over me. They wanted me to think about how I treated her brother. Fine, I had thought about it. And soon they would be the ones forced to think about how they treated me. The storm wasn't loud yet, but it was building quietly, surely. The first real move I made was subtle. I redirected my paycheck. Instead of flowing into the joint account where Sarah had free access, it now went into my individual account, the one she didn't know much about. It only took a few clicks, but the ripple it would create was enormous. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything. In that time, I stayed quiet, living out of the small apartment, going to work as usual, and pretending that nothing had changed. My phone buzzed with occasional texts from Sarah. When are you coming back? We need to talk. You're being stubborn. I didn't answer. Silence became my shield. Then one evening, my phone rang. This time, she didn't bother with pleasantries. The mortgage payment bounced, she snapped. What's going on? I kept my voice calm. I told you I needed time to think. I guess the bank account needed time to think, too. There was a pause on the line, followed by the faint sound of James's voice in the background. I could almost picture him standing there, feeding her words. You can't just stop paying, she said finally, her voice rising. This is our house. Our life. Our house, I repeated, letting the silence stretch. Funny because lately it felt like I was just a guest in your house. Remember the night you threw my clothes on the floor and told me to leave? Her breath caught for a moment. I thought she might apologize, but then her tone hardened. You're overreacting. James needed a place to stay, and you turned it into a power struggle. This is petty, maybe, I said quietly. Or maybe it's just fair. I ended the call before she could respond. That night, I sat in the dim glow of the apartment and thought about how quickly love could shift into coldness. I had given her everything, my trust, my money, my partnership. And now, when the balance of power shifted even slightly, she revealed just how fragile her loyalty really was. The next few days brought more frantic messages. She called twice to tell me the utility bills hadn't gone through. Then came the text, "Do you expect me to cover all of this on my own?" With what money? I didn't reply because that was the point. She couldn't. And deep down, I think she was beginning to understand just how much of her comfortable life had been built on the foundation of my efforts. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Pressure was building, and soon something would break. And when it did, I intended to be ready. By the third week, the cracks were visible, even from a distance. Sarah called me more often now, not out of love, but out of necessity. The cheerful tone she once used was gone, replaced by frustration, sometimes panic. One night she left me a voicemail I replayed 3 times. "Listen, I can't keep up with this. The power company is threatening to cut us off. The grocery card doesn't work anymore. James, he's trying to find a job, but you know it's tough. Can't we just talk this through, please?" For the first time in weeks, I almost felt pity almost. But then I remembered the sight of my clothes dumped on the floor, the smirk on her brother's face, the sound of their laughter as they mocked me in my own living room. No, pity had no place here. At work, I carried on as usual. My colleagues had no idea what storm brewed in my personal life. They joked at lunch, complained about deadlines, and I smiled along, all the while knowing I was fighting a private war. My calm exterior was my armor. I did meet with a lawyer, though a quiet, meticulous man named Michael, who asked few questions but gave clear answers. He explained the mortgage situation, the rights tied to my name, and the protections I still had. His calmness reassured me. I wasn't cornered. I had far more leverage than they realized. "Take your time," Michael advised. "Don't act rashly. Pressure reveals truth. Let's see how they handle it." And so I did. A few days later, another call came. This time, Sarah's voice was sharper, almost accusing. "Are you enjoying this? Watching us struggle while you sit comfortably somewhere else?" I let a beat of silence pass before answering. "I'm not enjoying it, but I am learning. Learning what my presence meant, what my effort was worth." "You're punishing me for loving my brother," she snapped. "No," I said quietly. "I'm showing you what happens when you choose him over me." The line went dead after that, but I knew she had heard me. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply. Not because the war was over, but because I could sense the tide was turning. The next weekend, curiosity got the better of me. I drove past the house late in the evening, parking across the street where shadows hid my car. The front porch light flickered weakly, and the blinds were half drawn. Through a gap, I could see movement inside. Sarah, pacing, phone in hand, while James lounged on the couch with a game controller. Even from a distance, the tension was obvious. She was gesturing sharply, her voice raised, though muffled by the glass. He, in turn, shrugged, his focus never straying far from the screen. The scene told me everything I needed to know. The pressure was working. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from her. "We need to meet, just the 2 of us," I agreed. We met at a quiet diner on the edge of town. She looked tired, makeup hastily applied to mask the dark circles under her eyes. For the first time in months, she didn't carry herself like someone with the upper hand. She started without preamble. "This can't go on. I can't keep paying for everything. You know I can't. And James, he's trying. But he doesn't have anything stable yet." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the swirl of cream. "So now you understand what I was saying. One person carrying everything isn't sustainable." I asked for help. "You threw me out instead." Her lips tightened. "I overreacted. I was just trying to protect him by destroying us." I asked softly. The words seemed to sting. She looked away, fingers gripping her mug. "I don't want to lose our marriage." It was strange hearing her say it. A few weeks ago, she had chosen her brother over me without hesitation. Now, with the walls closing in, she suddenly remembered what we had built together. But I wasn't the same man she had tossed aside. "Marriage," I said carefully, "isn't about one person sacrificing everything while the other defends someone who refuses to grow up. If we're going to survive this, things have to change radically." She nodded a little too quickly, as if agreeing was the only lifeline she had left. But her eyes flickered with hesitation. And I knew then she wanted me back, but not enough to truly stand up to him. As we left the diner, she reached for my hand. I let her fingers brush against mine, but didn't clasp them. Because in my heart I already knew this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about survival. and soon survival would demand choices she wasn't prepared to make. After the diner meeting, I didn't rush back. I could see she expected me to follow her home, to resume my role as provider while she clung to her brother's excuses. But I wasn't going to step back into the same trap. Instead, I let more time pass. Silence, I had learned, was louder than any argument. A week later, she showed up at my small apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, I saw the strain etched deep into her face. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair unkempt. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Please," she said simply, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We can't keep this up. The bills, the food, the stress, it's tearing everything apart. James, he's still looking for work, but she trailed off." And for the first time, she didn't sound defensive. She sounded defeated. I gestured for her to sit, but I didn't soften my voice. "So, you want me to come back to fix everything while he stays?" Her hands twisted in her lap. "He's family. I can't throw him out on the street, and I'm not." I asked quietly. She flinched but didn't answer. I leaned back, studying her. "Do you remember the night you told me to leave? You chose him without hesitation. You threw away your marriage to protect someone who refuses to protect himself. You laughed at me with him in our own living room. Do you think I can forget that?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I wasn't laughing at you. I was angry. I felt like you were controlling everything with money." "Money." I shook my head. "It wasn't money. It was responsibility. The roof over our heads, the lights, the food. Those weren't gifts. They were the basics of life. And I carried them all. You let him mock me? And now you've seen what happens without it." She buried her face in her hands, and for a long time, the room was silent, except for her muffled sobs. A part of me wanted to comfort her, but another part, the part that had spent weeks in exile while they lived off my sacrifices, held me steady. This wasn't about sympathy anymore. It was about truth. Finally, she lifted her head. Her voice was small, trembling. "What do you want me to do?" The question lingered in the air. It was the first time she had ever asked me, that not demanded, not accused, asked. I let the silence stretch, making sure she felt the weight of it. Then I spoke slowly, clearly. "I want you to decide who your family really is. Because if it's him, then you and I are already done. If it's me, then things have to change completely. No more freeloading, no more disrespect, no more choosing him over us." Her eyes widened as though the ultimatum shocked her. But I had no other choice. I had been patient. I had been calm. And I had shown her what life without me looked like. Now, it was time for her to face the decision she had avoided for too long. She opened her mouth to answer, but closed it again, staring down at the floor. And in that silence, I understood the real climax wasn't what I would do. It was what she was capable of. The days after her visit stretched long and uneasy. She didn't give me an answer that night, and I didn't press her. Instead, I let her return to the house where James still sat on my couch, eating food bought with money I no longer provided. Her texts grew more fragmented, almost desperate. "We need to talk again. James says he'll find something soon. I'm trying to keep everything together." I noticed one detail, though. She no longer accused me. The sharp edges of her words had dulled. Now they carried something closer to fear. One evening I drove past the house again. This time the windows were dark, except for a faint glow in the kitchen. A single bulb illuminated Sarah sitting at the table, head in her hands, while James paced in the background, shouting. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. The body language was enough. He was frustrated, cornered, lashing out. She was overwhelmed, and for the first time, I saw the shift I had been waiting for. Their alliance was cracking. The next morning, she called me. Her voice was exhausted. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "I told James he has to leave. He screamed at me, called me selfish, but I don't care. I can't keep destroying everything for him." Her words washed over me slowly like the tide. Part of me felt relief, part of me sorrow. It shouldn't have taken all this pain for her to realize what I had known from the start. "So," I said carefully, "you've made your choice." "Yes," she whispered. I choose you if you'll still have me. Silence stretched between us. I thought of the laughter I had overheard weeks earlier, the sight of my belongings tossed carelessly to the floor, the sting of betrayal in her eyes when she sided with him. Could I trust her again? That question lingered in my mind as I ended the call with a quiet, "We'll see," because forgiveness, I knew, wasn't something I could hand out as easily as a paycheck. When I finally walked back into the house, it felt different. The energy that had once been heavy with arrogance and defiance was gone. James's shoes were no longer by the door. His clutter no longer spread across the living room. The silence that greeted me was sharp, but it was mine. Sarah stood in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "He's gone." I nodded slowly, setting down my keys. "And what about us?" She stepped closer, tentative, like she was afraid I'd push her away. "I want us back. I want to fix what I broke." Her voice shook, and for the first time she sounded genuine. Not defensive, not angry, just vulnerable. I looked around the house, remembering the nights I'd spent away. The weeks of silence, the pain of being cast out from the life I had built. I thought of the motel ceiling, the empty apartment, the sound of their laughter at my expense. "I'm not sure if I can forget," I said quietly. "But I can try." On one condition, she held her breath. "Anything. No more secrets. No more choosing him or anyone over us. If you want this marriage to survive, you need to stand with me, not against me." She nodded quickly, almost desperately. "I will, I promise." Her words were soft, but I knew promises are easy. Trust, however, would take time to rebuild. That night, as we sat at the same kitchen table where so many arguments had sparked, there was no shouting, no laughter at my expense. Just silence, heavy but cleansing. I didn't need revenge in the form of shouting or triumph. My revenge had already happened quietly, over weeks of absence. She had lived without me, without my support, without my presence. She had chosen her brother, and reality had shown her the cost. In the end, my victory wasn't in forcing her to see. It was in letting her live long enough with her decision to regret it. And as I sipped my coffee the next morning, the house peaceful for the first time in months, I knew this. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply stepping back and letting the truth do the work for you.